Welcome, everyone. Grab a seat. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for today's explainer. Think of this as a sort of masterclass, okay? We're diving into a uniquely American cultural evolution today. We're going to explore the incredibly fascinating story of how American musical theater went from just a bunch of casual amateur social clubs to the massive professional multi-million-dollar industry that we all know today. It's basically a tale of high-minded academic refinement totally colliding with cutthroat commercial hustle. Okay, let's dive into this. To truly wrap our heads around the Broadway empire of today, we have to look back, way back to the late 1800s and early 1900s. We're using the historical text, the Imperial History and Encyclopedia of Music, as our foundation to really dig into the birth pangs, the growing pains, and, oh man, the intense sibling rivalries that laid the groundwork for this massive cultural institution. Here is our syllabus for today's lecture. We're going to go from clubs to academic halls, explore Boston's refined musical culture, and look at operetta and the American style. Then we'll hit on immigrant traditions and vaudeville, New York's wild theatrical rivalries, and finally, how we standardized the professional industry. Section 1, from clubs to academic halls. Now, it might surprise you, but the highly regulated professional theater world of today, it actually started in very amateur social settings. Just individual music lovers getting together. As early as 1762, you've got the St. Cecilia Society down in Charleston, South Carolina. Then jump to 1808, an undergraduate orchestral society called the Pierian Sodality forms at Harvard. These were literally just social clubs. They weren't professional training grounds by any stretch, but, they kept the music alive. It wasn't actually until 1875 that Harvard established the very first music professorship in America. That's the turning point where it goes from a casual hobby to a serious academic pursuit. Section 2, Boston's refined musical culture. So out of that early Harvard club grew the Harvard Musical Association. And in Boston, they treated music as this deeply refined cultural pursuit. It definitely wasn't just meant for cheap entertainment. A massive figure here is Professor John K. Payne. He was actually the first American classical composer to get real international fame. His Mass was performed over in Berlin in 1867. Payne championed incredibly high artistic standards, formalizing theory and musical history long before the whole commercial theater boom even took off. And this brilliantly illustrates the central tension of our story. Seriously, it's like a giant tug-of-war. On one side, Boston's refined academic influence, Harvard, strict standards, high art. But then on the other side, New York's commercial vaudeville and spectacle, places like Coster and Beale's Music Hall or the Weber and Fields burlesques. Their goal? Sell tickets, make them laugh, and pack the house every single night no matter what. The American musical was born right out of the collision of those two totally different worlds. Section 3, Operetta and the American style. Okay, so how did those worlds merge? As composers started aiming for these massive commercial audiences, a totally new American style started to take shape. You absolutely cannot understand early theater without looking at Reginald de Koven and Victor Herbert. De Koven was the initial spark. His 1890 operetta Robin Hood bridged European styles with American tastes and was performed over 3,000 times. That is staggering. But if de Koven was the spark, Victor Herbert was the wildfire. An adopted American and an absolute master orchestrator, Herbert's scores for shows like Naughty Marietta were so lush and dramatic. He proved you could have huge commercial success without sacrificing an ounce of musical depth. Section 4. Immigrant traditions and vaudeville. Now, this commercial explosion wasn't just driven by American academics. The New York theater scene was this massive, beautiful melting pot. You had the German Singspiel blending spoken dialogue with music. You had the incredibly popular light, comedic flair of French opera bouffe coming in right after the Civil War. Add in German and Scandinavian immigrant singing societies, and then top it all off with lavish British pantomimes imported from Drury Lane. All these disparate immigrant traditions completely crashed together to create this uniquely American and, kind of chaotic musical style. Now, what's really interesting about this quote from Harry B. Smith is just the unabashed commercialism of it all. I care not who writes my country's songs if I may draw the royalties. Smith was the most prolific librettist of the era, and he was fiercely pragmatic. He was writing hundreds of librettos, literally adapting shows week to week based on fads or whatever star was on stage at the time. Critics absolutely hated it. They even coined the term Harry B. Smithing for his tired jokes. But audiences, they ate it up. It was the ultimate triumph of the commercial hustle. Section 5. New York's theatrical rivalries. This intense drive for cash leads us right into the fierce geographic and institutional rivalries driving New York's industry between 1900 and 1920. One major growing pain was the degradation of the art form itself. Musical comedy basically became a decadent form of light opera. Instead of a tight, integrated story like earlier operas, it sacrificed dramatic coherence entirely, just to become a vehicle to show off huge popular stars. Producers would string together solos and comedy routines with the thinnest little plot just to appease the crowds and make a buck. And wow, the critics could be absolutely brutal. Look at this 1901 New York Times review for a show called The Prima Donna, co-written by our pragmatic guy, Harry B. Smith, by the way. The critic called it a sea of hopelessly silly dialogue and frequent cheap and foolish music. And then they delivered the ultimate punch to the gut. The prima donna is tenuous, it is diaphanous, it is almost invisible. Ouch, right? It's a stark reminder of the massive commercial risks these writers were taking during this theatrical gold rush. And it wasn't just light comedy. Serious opera had these million-dollar battles too. First, you have the Academy of Music. But then, a rival faction of wealthy New Yorkers decided to found the Metropolitan Opera House in 1883. Fast forward, Oscar Hammerstein opens the Manhattan Opera House in 1906, creating this massive rivalry with the Met. They fought tooth and nail over the best European singers and the absolute latest works. It drove incredible innovation and raised professional standards, for sure, but the financial risks were just astronomical in their battle for supremacy. Section 6. Standardizing the professional industry. So the crucial point is, this cutthroat Wild West environment couldn't last forever. Enter Victor Herbert again. Not just a musical genius, but a fierce advocate for artists. He helped found ASCAP, the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. By formalizing modern royalty systems and protecting creators' rights, Herbert and his peers finally turned musical theater from a chaotic hustle into a standardized, protected profession. They took the academic standards and the commercial drive and finally found a balance. Looking back at the foundations of American music, the journey is just incredible. From 1762 amateur social clubs in Charleston and the academic halls of Harvard, to the collision of Boston's refined standards with New York's immigrant melting pot, right up to the fierce opera rivalries tamed by standardized rights. This is literally the exact blueprint of how the multi-million-dollar American theater industry was forged. I'll leave you, my students, with this final question to chew on. If our entertainment industry was built on this intense collision between high-minded academic refinement and shameless commercial hustle, what modern rivalries are secretly shaping the art, the media, and the theater we consume today? Keep an eye out for those tensions because history, as they say, always takes center stage. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.